Hey, Jeff, what brings us to downtown Providence, Rhode Island on Valentine's Day?
Ray, I thought we'd stroll down Benefit Street to the Providence Athenaeum, so I could ask you, would you be my Valentine?
Well, gee, Jeff, I like you a lot, but not really in that way.
I get it. It's okay. I mean, this week we're exploring a legend about rejection anyway.
A legend about rejection?
A legend about rejection that's led to a haunting here at the Athenaeum of a very famous person. This week, we're in Providence in search of the broken-hearted ghost of Edgar Allan Poe. I'm Jeff Belanger, and welcome to episode 78 of the New England Legends podcast. If you give us about 10 minutes, we'll give you something strange to talk about today.
And I'm Ray Auger. We're on a mission to chronicle every legend in New England 1 week and one story at a time. And we couldn't do it without our patrons who sponsor us, by the way. If you head over to patreon.com/New England Legends, for only $3 a month, you can get early access to new episodes, you get bonus episodes no one else gets to hear, and you help support the movement.
And be sure to tell a friend or two about our podcast. The more legendary listeners we have, the more who get involved, the more unique stories we can find for you each and every week.
All right, Jeff, the Providence Athenaeum is haunted by none other than Edgar Allan Poe?
That's right.
As in, quote, the Raven nevermore, Edgar Allan Poe?
The very same.
When most people think of Poe, they think of Baltimore, Maryland, though.
Yeah, that's true. That's where he's buried, and I've even been to his grave.
But Poe is originally a New England legend. He was born in Boston on January 19th, 1809.
So what brought him to Providence?
Well, a girl.
It's always a girl, isn't it?
And had things gone differently with Poe's courtship, maybe Providence would have been his adopted home.
Well, let's set this up. Sarah Helen Whitman was born in Providence January 19th, 1803.
Now, that's 6 years to the day before Edgar Allan Poe. Coincidence?
I think not. So Sarah is a poet and an essayist in her own right, but she's frail as well. She has this heart condition that she treats by inhaling ether through a handkerchief.
Ooh.
Still, she's a spooky chick. Her first husband dies when she's 30, leaving her a wealthy widow. A widow free to pursue her interests like transcendentalism and spiritualism. She'd hold seances in her house. She often wears black and even has a coffin pendant she wears around her neck.
I like her already. Sounds like she was goth before there was goth.
She could easily have been the original goth. And being into such dark subjects, it's really no surprise at all that she's a big fan of Edgar Allan Poe.
Poe is a master of dark. His poetry, his stories, everything about him. The Telltale Heart, The Fall of the House of Usher. And I still think his most famous poem, The Raven, is incredible. I mean, it's just so spooky.
Absolutely. So Sarah first sees Poe in Providence in July of 1845, but Poe declines to meet her when walking by her house. Still, Sarah can't get him out of her mind. She once told a friend,
I can never forget the impressions I felt in reading a story of his for the first time. I experienced a sensation of such intense horror that I dared neither look at anything he had written nor even utter his name. By degrees, this terror took the character of fascination. I devoured with a half-reluctant and fearful avidity every line that fell from his pen.
In February of 1848, Sarah's friend, the poet Annie Lynch, asks her to write a poem for a Valentine's Day party. So she writes a poem titled To Edgar Allan Poe, where she reimagines Poe's masterpiece, The Raven, from the bird's perspective. Here's a section of the poem.
Midst the roaring of machinery and the dismal shriek of steam, while each poppin' jay and parrot makes the golden age his theme, oft methinks I hear thee croaking, all is but an idle dream. While these warbling guests of summer prate of progress evermore, and by dint of iron foundries would this golden age restore, still, methinks, I hear thee croaking, hoarsely croaking, nevermore.
It's worth noting that Edgar Allan Poe lost his first wife in 1847 and was not in attendance at this party. But he did hear about the poem and eventually got to read it for himself.
All right, look, I'm no matchmaker, but damn if these two don't sound perfect for each other.
I know, right? So Sarah Helen Whitman casts her spell, and Edgar Allan Poe falls under it. He sends a poem back to her called To Helen.
Helen, thy beauty is to me like those Nicean barks of yore, that gently, over a perfumed sea, the weary way-worn wanderer bore to his own native shore. On desperate seas long wont to roam, thy hyacinth hair, thy classic face, thy naiad airs have brought me home to the glory that was Greece, and the grandeur that was Rome. Lo, in yon brilliant window niche, how statue-like I see thee stand, the agate lamp within thy hand. Ah, Psyche, from the regions which are Holy Land.
Now, at this point, Edgar Allan Poe is smitten with Sarah.
Yeah.
The two exchange letters and poems, making their courtship happen through their words.
It's now 1848, and Poe is visiting Sarah in Providence, so she brings him to her favorite place in the whole world, the Providence Athenaeum. Inside this building, the two bond over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore.
I see what you did there. Quote the Raven.
Okay, I'm guilty of borrowing that line from Poe. But Poe soon proposes marriage to Sarah in a local cemetery, which is perfect, right? And Whitman adamantly refuses. She's not sure she can handle his drinking and his self-destructive ways.
Poe is devastated at the rejection. In early November, he makes a half-hearted suicide attempt with an overdose of laudanum. Thankfully, it doesn't kill him, and 4 days later, he finds himself sitting in a studio in Providence, stone-faced for a daguerreotype portrait that will go on to become his most famous image.
It's now December of 1848, and Poe isn't giving up on trying to win the hand of Sarah Whitman. During a lecture in Providence, while Sarah sits in the audience, Poe recites a poem by Edward Pinckney called A Health. Something in those words, the way Poe is saying them, the way he's locking eyes with her, Sarah gives in.
So Sarah agrees to marry Poe, and she wants to make it happen right away. They agree to a Christmas Day wedding in just a couple weeks,
But there's always a but.
Poe has to agree to stop drinking entirely.
There it is.
He quickly does, because his love for Sarah is stronger than his love for booze.
All right.
So the two start planning their wedding and lives together.
It's an exciting time for the couple, but it's also a challenging time for the tormented Poe. Picture this. It's just 2 days before Christmas, and Poe and Sarah are sitting with each other in an alcove at the Providence Athenaeum when a messenger approaches with a note for Sarah. Sarah opens the letter, reads the words, and is heartbroken. The note says that Poe was seen drunk the night before. He had broken his promise of sobriety, and Sarah immediately calls off the wedding, running home with Edgar Allan Poe chasing close behind. Sarah races to her bedroom, soaks a handkerchief in ether, and renders herself unconscious. Poe tries to rouse her, but Sarah is incoherent. Before completely slipping into a deep sleep, she mutters,
I love you.
Poe's shoulders slump. He bows his head and turns to leave. The two never see each other again.
Edgar Allan Poe died just 10 months later in Baltimore, Maryland. He was 40 years old. He never recovered from his depression or his breakup with Sarah Whitman. Though his official cause of death is unknown, some have speculated he died from alcohol. Others suggest he finally succeeded in killing himself with laudanum. We'll never know.
How tragic.
Yeah.
But hey, there's more to the story, by the way.
What's that?
Well, Sarah Whitman is said to have held a seance inside the Providence Athenaeum after Poe's death in an effort to summon his spirit.
I love that.
So maybe, just maybe, she succeeded. And that's part of the reason this building is haunted.
Which brings us back to today. That famous portrait of Edgar Allan Poe taken just a few days after his suicide attempt, a copy of it hangs inside the Providence Athenaeum today.
Ooh.
But some people claim that Poe's broken-hearted ghost also hangs around here. Maybe Sarah Whitman summoned him and never let him go.
Or maybe Poe haunts the place where the couple were happiest.
Maybe.
Two writers among all these great books.
A story they'll tell you on the Providence Ghost Walks is that at one time, a dark-haired man was found sleeping on the steps leading up to the Athenaeum. Thinking he was a vagrant, they asked him to move along. An employee approaches, tries to stir him. The man shouts,
The Conqueror Worm!
And then disappears into thin air.
The Conqueror Worm?
That's the title of one of Poe's poems.
Okay.
It's this dark little tale about a phantom chased forevermore.
Still, it's pretty cool to walk around the Providence Athenaeum today and know Edgar Allan Poe stood right here where we're standing.
And had his heart broken in one of those alcoves right over there.
And then died alone and lonely 10 months later. It's kind of weird.
Yeah.
Happy Valentine's Day, Jeff.
Yeah. Happy Valentine's Day, Ray.
Did Did you know the Providence Athenaeum was also one of H.P. Lovecraft's favorite buildings?
Well, I guess that shouldn't be a surprise, considering Providence was Lovecraft's hometown.
And it's pretty amazing that two masters of the horror genre share the building in common.
It is. And hey, if you're listening to this podcast and you don't already subscribe, you need to, because it's free and only takes a second through your smartphone or computer. Just head over to iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play, TuneIn, or wherever you get your podcasts. Search for New England Legends, subscribe, and we'll tell you a new story every Thursday.
We'd like to thank Michael Legge and Lorna Nagara for lending their voice acting talents this week. And our theme music is by John Judd.
Until next time, remember, the bizarre is closer than you think.